Okay, let's turn now to Unit 7 preparation for the EOCT. In Unit 7, we will cover Standard 17, Standard 18, and Standard 19 of the U.S. History Standards for the EOCT and, of course, test. And the title of Unit 7 is A National Crisis. Standard 17 is going to refer to the Great Depression in the United States. Standard 18, we're going to talk about the New Deal, FDR's New Deal. And Standard 19, we're going to talk about World War II. Alright, so here's Standard 17 has three substandards here, A, B, and C. Let's go ahead and jump into that. And remember, we have to look at the language of the standards. We're going to focus on that only. That way we don't teach too much or teach too little. Alright, so the student will analyze the causes and consequences of the Great Depression. So we're going to talk about the Great Depression. What caused the Great Depression? And then what were the consequences of the Great Depression? Okay, and we're going to analyze both of those. Alright, so let's go to 17A. It says, describe the causes including. Okay, there's many causes for the Great Depression, but here our standards are going to limit us to only overproduction, underconsumption, stock market speculation. So these three causes are what we're going to be looking at: overproduction, underconsumption, and stock market speculation, that led to the stock market crash of 1929 and the Great Depression. Before we get to these causes, I'm going to touch on overproduction a little bit in this, but let's look at the stock market crash of 1929. What is a stock? What is the stock market? And what do we mean by it crashed in 1929? And then what's the Great Depression? What is that? Alright. So, stock market crash in 1929. We're going to focus on that in our standards. And then the Great Depression. Okay. So let's look. Our element here is causes of the Great Depression. And then we have a theme: trade, industry, and technology. Political and social interactions as well. Let's go to the Great Depression first. So let's see what the Great Depression is. So let's kind of define it. From 1929 to about 1941 in the United States, the Great Depression refers to this time period or era where there was a severe economic downturn in U.S. history, and it's going to be felt throughout the world. Let me put severe in here. There has never been an economic downturn in the United States that has met the Great Depression period here, this era of time. 13 million people, about 25%, are going to be unemployed without work. 25%, that's 1 in 4 people without a job. Those with jobs have half the hours and half the wages, and factories are going to shut down, banks are going to close, farms went into bankruptcy, millions found themselves homeless without a home to live in, penniless. People eating out of trash cans and street alleys, lined up in bread lines and soup kitchens trying to get food because they didn't have money to eat. People wondering how they're going to take care of their children. A lot of suicides happened during this time period. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about the Great Depression, and there's a few tests on the EOCT and the graduation test as well that kind of pinpoint this Great Depression era and try to get you to understand what it means. And here's the general definition of the Great Depression in that era in history. Okay. Now we're supposed to talk about this Great Depression, what caused it. And one of the causes is the stock market crash, or actually not a cause, but what the causes led to this stock market crash. So let's look at it. Let's read closely our standing. The causes including overproduction, underconsumption, and stock market speculation. Those three are the causes that led to the stock market crash of 1929. What I'm trying to get you to understand here is that the stock market crash is not a cause of the Great Depression. It is merely a signal. It was a signal that the Great Depression was coming, that decade or more, 12 years is going to come, and we're going to have to deal with a bad economy. So the stock market crash in 1929 is much like the fuel hand on your car. You know, if you look at that, did your fuel hand being on empty cause your car to run out of gas? or did it just indicate that your car was out of gas and you needed to put some in it? So it's the stock market crash in 1929 was just an indicator the Great Depression was here, or that it was on its way. Okay. Now, what is a stock? Okay. What is the stock market, and then what is a stock itself? Okay. And then we need to talk about the crash. So, what is a stock? Okay. When we talk about stocks, we're going to talk about this place. This is in New York City, this building here, and it's called the New York Stock Exchange, and it's on Wall Street. You hear people talk about Wall Street all the time. If you go inside of this building, you're liable to see on the New York Stock Exchange a bunch of brokers down here trading in stocks, common stocks, and all sorts of different other types of investments that are made in business on a daily basis. They're bought and sold right here at the stock exchange in New York City, this building here on Wall Street. So this is the economic central or heart of the United States, and some might even say the world. But okay, you've probably seen the charging bull out near the New York Stock Exchange, you know, in New York City. Let's use Google Maps and let's go there to New York City. Here it is here. Let's go down here to New York City and let's see what we can find this building. There's the bay. We've been here before in this class. We're going to go a little closer. We're going to go to Manhattan. Here's Manhattan. Here's the Ellis Island, Statue of Liberty right there. So here we are in lower Manhattan. If we keep getting closer, we're going to see Wall Street right here. This street running here. It's Wall Street. Now right here is the New York Stock Exchange. Let's get a little closer. See the New York Stock Exchange. That's the picture we just looked at. That's that building. Here is the bull. Let me see if I can bring us in on that. Bring us a picture of this up. Let's see. There he is. There's the bull there. Some people standing around taking pictures of it. Alright. Let's zoom back out here a little bit. And if we go over here, this is lower Manhattan, remember? Okay, if we go over here to this New York Stock Exchange, we can find us a place, hopefully, right here, where we can see this building. There it is. The New York Stock Exchange building. Okay, that's the one we're talking about. Alright, so that's where it is in New York City if you want to go there and visit. That's where stocks are traded on a daily basis within the United States. Alright, so what is a stock? There's the Raging Bull and there's the pictures here of New York Stock Exchange. Here's some stocks here. I just want to show you these because we've talked about these corporations before. You know, a single individual owning something could cause them to lose a lot. So sometimes to try to share with the expenses, and since individuals only have a limited amount of wealth, they need more money to invest into their business, or capital to invest in their business or corporation if they make it into a corporation. And what they do is they sell it to the public and make a company out of it. Like Ford Motor Company, we talked about Henry Ford. Sold his business, it become a corporation. And then Standard Oil Trust or corporation is John D. Rockefeller's business. Here's a certificate. These are stock certificates. If you bought some shares of common stock in these businesses, they would grant you a certificate like this, numbering the amount of shares that you bought. Each share is worth a certain amount of money and costs a certain amount of money. Here's one with Carnegie Metals. Carnegie Metals was a sell out to United States Steel, to JP Morgan. But Andrew Carnegie used to own this one. Here's 100 shares in it. Pullman Palace Car Company was George Pullman. We talked about the Pullman strike. Those sleeper cars on the trains. These are some old stocks. Certificate where people had bought and invested in those companies and shared every quarter, every 3 months, they would get money from these corporations, and it would be a return on their investment. Here's some more of our time common stocks that were sold recently. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg sold Facebook to the public and made it into a corporation. and we saw when it first came out prices kind of dropped. They picked it back up again, and here's 100 shares Facebook stock. McDonald's Corporation here, AT&T, the telephone company where you get your cell phone or your house phone from, and then Coca-Cola Company. There's another one. Just to give you a few ideas, if you bought a share or many shares in this, you would own like parts of the business. And every quarter, whatever profits that were made, you would get a certain percentage of it, called dividends check. And that's how you invest in these businesses. That's how they expand and do different things with their business. Okay. In 1929 and before, people used to watch, like here's what we call a ticker symbol up here. These were different businesses' ticker symbols, and that's how much they were being sold for per price. It would show you increases or decreases in the value of the stock or the price of the stock. This little ticker machine, people will be watching those on a continuous basis. Here's one here. This guy's looking here. He's smoking his pipe, looking at his stock, checking out how much money he's making or losing on this ticker machine. And guess who made this ticker machine? You said it. Thomas Edison used to work with the telegraph company and made this machine, and he invented it. Here's his invention here. Here's some with some improvements. But he made the first. There it is there with that tape coming out. And when we talk about these ticker symbols, what we're talking about is like Ford Motor Company. On this piece of paper, if you saw an F by itself, you know, it would mean that's the Ford Motor Company. An X would be U.S. Steel. Carnegie is still sold out to U.S. Steel. Standard Oil Company was SOCU, was this ticker symbol. I didn't know Pullman's. I don't know if they had one. Today, if you were to look it up, you know, you were to look up Coca-Cola, it'd be KO. Facebook, FB. McDonald's would be MCD. Here's one, AT&T is just a T. So if we look here at McDonald's, and let's say you want to buy some stock in McDonald's, you would they would take your money and invest it in their business. Open up another line of product, or spend it on toys to try to get families into McDonald's to eat, whatever. But anyway, as of July 12, 2013, while I'm doing this video, each one share of McDonald's stock is sold at $101.66. And today's change is up by 87 cents, or up 0.86% here. And year to date, this entire year, it's gone up 15%. So you see a big increase here in McDonald's stock. The idea is to buy it while it's low. Buy the stock and shares of it while it's low, and when it gets up high, either hang on to it and keep your stock, or when it gets up high, you can sell it and reinvest in some other stock, whatever floats your boat. But anyway, could you imagine if something happened to beef in the United States, or chicken, or potatoes, how that would affect McDonald's stock? You know, if those things went into a scarcity, or if they were overproduced, what would happen to the price of stock? Definitely it would either drop or rise with McDonald's stock. And sometimes overproduction, that's one of the things we need to talk about. In 1929, there was oversupply that's going to cause a drop in wheat prices. And when there's a drop in wheat prices at this time, also caused a price drop in other areas, other stocks, because it sends a shockwave through the stock market. But anyway, in 1929, there were 250 million bushels of wheat carried over into 1929 that were not used as a surplus. And then 560 million bushels were ready in the state of Mississippi alone. So there was really a surplus. But in the world market, they usually dumped surpluses off into the world market and sold them all. But France and Italy have produced record crops of wheat, and so the market had already been flooded. So this overproduction of wheat causes this huge supply in wheat within the United States and within the world because of France and Italy and the United States. And we know what an oversupply does. When supply and demand, we've already talked about when we talked about oil with John D. Rockefeller. What happens with wheat? is when the supply is too high and it saturates the market, the price of it goes down, and if the price of that wheat goes down, it's going to affect the price of other products. So the stock prices dropped on a New York Stock Exchange. It causes wave of stock prices to drop as well. And commodity prices like wheat usually affect the stock market vitality. And this sharp drop in wheat prices is going to cause the cost per share of other stocks to drop as well. And when it does, a panic happens in 1929. In 1929, a lot of people started selling their stock off, trying to get rid of it because of the sharp decline in prices. And they want to get rid of this investment so they don't get hurt from it. And more people panic, and it spreads like wildfire. And they react because of fear and emotion rather than evaluating to see what's going to happen in the market. And so a bunch of people started selling their stocks. On Black Thursday, is what they call October 24th, 1929, was the first day of the stock market crash when a lot of stock was sold in one day. Black Thursday. Right here. Wall Street and panic and stocks crash right here. Billions are lost. And then we go to a day we refer to as Black Tuesday, which is the next, I think it's the next week, October 29th, 1929. Stock prices are going to drop 37%. So stockbrokers reported sales of 16.4 million shares of stock. A busy day before this day would have been 3 million shares sold. So the stock market is beginning to crash on this day, Black Tuesday, and result will deeper and deeper plunges in stock prices after this. And here's a picture of a newspaper that says stocks hit lowest levels, 16.4 million sales in one day. And that's what we just said. 16.4 million shares of stock sold in one day. 37% drop in prices. And here's where a bunch of people are gathered outside the New York Stock Exchange, waiting to sell and dump their own stock. There they are, wondering what's going on, panicking. And so here's what we see here is Black Tuesday is here in 1929, and everything's going to drop, and it's going to drop even further. By 1932, it's going to be the worst part of the Great Depression period, 1932, from 29 to 32. Let's look at how far these stocks prices are going to drop. In 1929, before the drop hit, before Black Tuesday, an average stock price where you took all the stock together, their prices added up and divided by the number, the average stock price was $455 in 1929. By 1932, it was only $55 was the average stock price. So these severe drops in stock prices caused industries to close their doors, go into bankruptcy. Banks are going to foreclose as well, close their doors. So what we see in these bank closures is that more than 9,000 banks across the United States are going to close. They're going to wipe out over 9 million savings accounts and banking accounts across the United States. That's why a lot of people that lived during this time period afterwards and during the latter part of it took whatever money they had, saved it in their on their cushions and buried it in their backyard because they didn't trust banks anymore. 86,000 businesses closed, and when this is going on, workers are losing their jobs, unemployed. Factories and mines shut down. Who's working? You know, the reason why there's no jobs is because no money's being invested in these corporations or industries. They don't have money to continue their business. So thousands of farms are also going to foreclose, and because of their debts, and they're going to be sold at auction. So this huge panic is going to cause these people in the United States to rush to their banks before they close, pull out all their money. And it's this panic during this stock market crash that's going to lead us into this deep Great Depression, economic depression within the United States, and that's going to make things worse. Okay? Alright, so that explains the stock market crash part of it. Okay, and we talked about the Great Depression part of it. Now we need to talk about the causes. Okay, these other causes like overproduction, underconsumption, and the stock market speculation. I just wanted to show you what the stock market crash was, and then what the Great Depression was as well. Alright, so here are the causes of the Great Depression: an overproduction in manufacturing and in agriculture, and then underconsumption in households, people not buying things, a decline in farm income, and then speculation in stocks. We need to talk about these three in great detail because they're listed in our standards here: overproduction, underconsumption, and stock market speculation. Look at overproduction first. We've already talked about it, like wheat. When we talked about the oversupply and production of wheat is going to cause the prices to drop. And here's an overproducted size of wheat pile here. And with the overproduction of wheat, we see as supply goes up, price goes down. It's law of supply and demand. And too much wheat was produced. Too many other products were being produced as well. And people just really couldn't, the demand was not there for those products, so they're really being wasted, and people were not buying them. And then we need to look at the other side of why didn't the people buy these, and underconsumption is a part of that. Consumption is a consumer who buys goods and uses them, the consumption of goods. Underconsumption is going to occur, and that's a cause of the Great Depression. Two things are going to cause underconsumption. 2 to 3 things. Alright. Businesses in the United States government gives them tax breaks and deductions. But these businesses, instead of taking the money they save from these tax deductions by the government, instead of increasing the wages of the people that work for them, what they do is they maintain their prices or raise their prices and then make a profit with the tax deduction and the maintained prices and the profits, but they hold the wages down. They don't increase their workers' wages. So what they're doing here is they're causing an unequal distribution of wealth in the United States. And at this time, 1/3 of personal income went to only 5% of the American population. So there's going to be a wide gulf in distribution of wealth between the rich and the poor. So what this does, and the reason these two things are not good, and the reason they cause the Great Depression, is that normal people experience decline in purchasing power. In other words, they didn't have the money to go out and buy stuff, and therefore did not buy the products that were being made. So the demand was not there, but the production was still going on. Overproduction and then this underconsumption is going to cause a situation where people are going to lose their jobs and become unemployed, and the economy is going to shut down. So underconsumption here is where people didn't have the money to buy things. They were in poverty. They had no money at all. And if we look at some of the statistics here, 60% of American families earn less than $2,000 a year needed to buy basic necessities. So there, 60% of American families were living in poverty. 80% of the nation's family had no savings at all whatsoever. So if they lost their jobs, they wouldn't have anything to turn to help them out of their circumstances. They would be homeless, pretty much, without anything. So that's a bad situation to be in there. And people couldn't buy things since their wages were not raised. So businesses, the way businesses are going to react when they get this initial drop in consumption, the only way they know how to react is lay workers off or fire workers. And so when they start doing that, that makes the situation worse, because buying power and it's going to reduce the chances of anybody else buying their goods. So we have another situation that puts us in a worse situation where there's more unemployed. Now there's not many people to buy any more goods. So it really makes it worse. So what we're talking about here is economic terms of supply and demand. So these businesses are overproducing things, or farmers overproducing their wheat products. And so the supply rises and they have what's called a surplus of goods. And then at the same time, because people didn't have extra money to spend because their wages were not increased, there was underconsumption. Consumers were not buying products. So the prices were dropping, the value of the stocks were dropping, and here we have a bad situation that's going to create this bad situation in the economy. So it's like a circular effect here. If we looked at this is poor looking, but here's where you get the idea. Reduced government regulation over businesses and low taxes increased business profits. So the businesses are going to make a profit, but they keep their prices either steady or they raise their prices, but they do not raise the wages of the workers. So the poor and working class lost the ability to buy these products because they were too high and because their wages were still too low, and so it causes underconsumption. With underconsumption, business overproduction, there's no profits to the business, so they fire people and lay them off, and it creates further unemployment, which comes back around here to not buying things in underconsumption again, and things just get worse and worse and worse in that cycle. And here's a different view of it. Reduced government regulation, low taxes, business profits, consumers not buying goods because their wages were not increased, loss of business profits, rise in unemployment, the cycle. Okay. So that's overproduction and underconsumption. While they were causes of the Great Depression, speculation in stocks was another cause. Okay, this is the third one I highlighted here for you. We talked about overproduction and underconsumption. Now stock market speculation. Okay, and here it is in green, stock market speculation. What we're talking about is this lift here in the 1920s upward. What made this value in stock, skyrocket? What made this huge increase so high? Okay, the economy looks like it's doing great. Really great. It's a boom of the 1920s, what we call an economic boom. This other side is what we call a bust. Anyway, buying on credit, speculation or buying on credit or buying on margin is what they call it. It's when you buy something and you don't have the money to pay for it totally. Okay, let's look at this top part. If you bought some stock, or if you got a loan, you got a loan without margin, you would get $20,000 and you'd buy some stock. You'd have $20,000 worth of stock invested in your stock option. But if you used a margin, if you bought a margin or credit, you would put $20,000 of your money in there. The bank would give you $10,000 more. Your total investment would be $30,000. And then what you would do is, after the stock prices increased, you would actually pay off your investment or bank loan or margin loan from your stockbroker or bank. And so this is a risky situation here, and a lot of people were doing this, speculating in stocks. And for the 1920s, the early part, until 1929, people made a lot of money. But then in 1929, this is going to be a bad thing. It's going to cause a Great Depression. So here's what happens. Here's how it works. You put $5,000. Let's say you've got $10,000 worth of stock. You put $5,000 in, and then you borrow $5,000 from your stockbroker. That'd be $10,000 worth of investment. So if your stock rises enough, you can increase your earnings. Okay. But what happens if your stock dives? Once it dives past the break-even point here at 5,000. When you get down here to 2,100, your stockbroker is going to call in a margin call and want you to pay for the rest of your stock. And if you can't, he's going to sell it to somebody else. Okay, so it's very dangerous, this buying on margin. It still happens today, but it's more regulated today. But back in this time, this was kind of like buying on credit. People really didn't have the money to pay back the stock. What does this mean? The stock market speculation. Here's the stories of the boys that make money buying on margin. Here's a little circular that went out, book, magazine type of thing that went out in Fame and Fortune Weekly here. It kind of really telling people they should go out and buy on margin. So they're buying a stock with a little money down and then installment plans. So if you went and bought a freezer from some store or rental place, you'd pay only a portion down, but every month you'd pay a little bit of money. Installment plans. Stocks were collateral for the loan. Eventually, these stocks inflated the price of stocks, buying on margin, above their actual worth. So what we're saying here is it was fantasy land. A good portion of this rise in the economy here was fantasy land, or buying on margin gave a false sense of economic growth in the United States. In other words, that's what I'm saying here. Okay, and it is this going to get us in a lot of trouble when people get caught in on their margins and they can't pay for it. It's going to really make a situation worse, and it's going to cause those prices to drop even further and devaluate. All right, so that's the three causes we talked about: overproduction, underconsumption, stock market speculation, the stock market crash of 1929, and how it caused the Great Depression. I think we've met our burden here, and we'll return with another video in a moment. But if you have any more questions about this, you need further elaboration on these, ask me in class. Good luck on the quiz, test EOCT. 1929, we're going to focus on that in our standards, and then the Great Depression. Okay. So let's look. Our element here is causes of the Great Depression, and then we have a theme: trade, industry, and technology, political and social interactions as well. Let's go to the Great Depression first. So let's see what the Great Depression is. So let's kind of define it. From 1929 to about 1941 in the United States, the Great Depression refers to this time period or era where there was a severe economic downturn in U.S. history, and it's going to be felt throughout the world. Let me put severe in here. There has never been an economic downturn in the United States that has met the Great Depression period here, this era of time. 13 million people, about 25%, are going to be unemployed without work. 25%, that's 1 in 4 people without a job. Those with jobs have half the hours and half the wages, and factories are going to shut down, banks are going to close, farms went into bankruptcy, millions found themselves homeless without a home to live in, penniless, people eating out of trash cans in street alleys, lined up in bread lines and soup kitchens trying to get food because they didn't have money to eat, people wondering how they're going to take care of their children. A lot of suicides happened during this time period. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about the Great Depression, and there's a few tests on the EOCT and the graduation test as well that kind of pinpoint this Great Depression era and try to get you to understand what it means. And here's the general definition of the Great Depression in that era in history. Okay. Now we're supposed to talk about this Great Depression, what caused it. And one of the causes is the stock market crash, or actually not a cause, but what the causes led to this stock market crash. So let's look at it. Let's read closely our standing here. The causes including overproduction, underconsumption, and stock market speculation. Those three are the causes that led to the stock market crash of 1929. What I'm trying to get you to understand here is that the stock market crash is not a cause of the Great Depression. It is merely a signal. It was a signal that the Great Depression was coming, that decade or more, 12 years is going to come, and we're going to have to deal with a bad economy. So the stock market crash in 1929 is much like the fuel hand on your car. You know, if you look at that, did your fuel hand being on empty cause your car to run out of gas? Or did it just indicate that your car was out of gas and you needed to put some in it? So it's the stock market crash in 1929 was just an indicator the Great Depression was here, or that it was on its way. Okay. Now, what is a stock? Okay. What caused the Great Depression? And then what were the consequences of the Great Depression? Okay. And we're going to analyze both of those. So let's go to 17a. It says, describe the causes, including. Okay, there's many causes for the Great Depression, but here our standards are going to limit us to only overproduction, underconsumption, stock market speculation. So these three causes are what we're going to be looking at: overproduction, underconsumption, and stock market speculation, that led to the stock market crash of 1929 and the Great Depression. Before we get to these causes, I'm going to touch on overproduction a little bit in this, but let's look at the stock market crash of 1929. What is a stock? What is the stock market? And what do we mean by it crashed in 1929? And then what's the Great Depression? What is that? Alright. So, stock market crash. Okay, let's turn now to Unit 7 preparation for the EOCT. In Unit 7, We will cover Standard 17, Standard 18, and Standard 19 of the U.S. History Standards for the EOCT end of course test. And the title of Unit 7 is a national crisis. Standard 17 is going to refer to the Great Depression in the United States. Standard 18, we're going to talk about the New Deal, FDR's New Deal. And Standard 19, we're going to talk about World War II. Alright, so here's Standard 17 has three substandards here, A, B, and C. Let's go ahead and jump into that. And remember, we have to look at the language of the standards. We've got to focus on that only. That way we don't teach too much or teach too little. Alright, so the student will analyze the causes and consequences of the Great Depression. So we're going to talk about the Great Depression.